All right, we're about four after. Why don't we get started? All right, I'm super excited for the topic today. Um, when I originally talked to Ryan about RepView, I was really intrigued because there wasn't really a resource out there for sales reps outside of Glassdoor to really get a good understanding of what was going on within a sales org. So if you really wanted to know what the culture was like, how they paid, all that kind of stuff, that didn't really exist to my knowledge before RepView, and that was one thing that got me interested in talking to these two. And this is a topic I have not talked before and done a webinar. I'm usually talking about cold calling and cold email and all this other stuff. And I was like, you know what? We need to do something for the reps out there. RepView is doing some really great things. And I think we need to talk about how reps can really advocate for themselves. And I got two guests I'm super excited about today to introduce you to. The first one's Ryan Walsh. He's the founder and CEO at RepView. You refer to yourself as a recovering CRO on LinkedIn. I love that part. And I'm really excited to get your perspective because you have like over 11 years, it looks like, as a sales executive. So you've sat in that seat, you've been the employer, done all that kind of stuff. And Darren Alpert, he's VP of strategy at RepView, two-time co-founder. One of them is backed by Mark Cuban. I'll have to ask you a little bit more about that. But you've spent a lot of time as a founder and then also in sales, in tech, Gong, G2, Trust Radius, a bunch of other companies. But you guys, I'm super excited to have this conversation with you today. Welcome.
Let's do it.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you bet. I want to also kind of preface this too with we're going to take questions and do all that kind of stuff throughout the webinar. So if you have something, feel free to drop it into the chat, especially if it's relevant to the topics that we're going to be covering. But we're really going to talk a lot about things that I don't think a lot of people talk about in a public forum. Pay, if you're at the right job or not. We're gonna dig into all of those kind of things. So if you have a question, please drop it into the chat. This will be recorded because I know a bunch of people are going to ask about that. We'll send it to you afterwards. But let's start with you, Ryan.
Yeah.
What was kind of the purpose? Why did you decide to start RepView? What's the
Yeah.
story?
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for having me. And you touched on it there here just a second ago, but the transaction that is a sales professional getting a job is very, very important, right? When you take a new job as a sales professional, it's so critical. And it's important for the company too. They don't want to get the hires wrong, believe it or not. Maybe you think they do because they tell you one thing and then there's something else when you get started. But it's so important. The problem with the transaction is that the information flow is really one-sided, right? Hey,
Yeah.
phone screen from the recruiter, hiring manager phone screen. Bring Ryan in. We want to talk to him. Director, manager, VP, role play, disc assessment, peer panel. All right. Hey, Ryan, we got 6 minutes left in the interview. Do you have any questions for us? That's so one-sided, right? I got my 6 minutes. Then I'm like, well, I just want to win the job, so I'm not going to throw any hard hitters at these folks. So what can we build that can balance out that information flow, right? Everything you need to know about that sales job. How much money can I make? Like how many of the team is hitting quota in that role? What's the most you can earn? What about culture, leadership, lead flow? So really, and you mentioned Glassdoor, right? Glassdoor is a good resource too. You can glean stuff. It's kind of hard. You got to sift through a lot though too. So we're like, let's be really laser focused. Let's be highly objective, data driven. And when you go to RepView and you look at a sales page, my goal and our goal, when you look at a profile page, is to very quickly and easily get a feel for what that's really like. I joke with Darren, so it's like, what's the best way to know if you're going to go to the right sales org? We have a good friend that works there, right? So our mission is like, we are your friend. We are your good friend, right? And so we're just continuing to build and iterate and get feedback from salespeople on what they want to see and really be mission driven and help make those decisions for people's livelihoods, which is so important. So that's the spiel on why RepView was started.
Love it. And by the way, I'm starting to see some questions in the chat. Feel free to keep them coming. We may not get to them right away because some of these, like Eric, the question you asked, we're going to address that in the topics today. One more question, Ryan, for you around this is why, like one thing that sticks out to me is you were a longtime sales executive. Why the focus on helping the rep advocate for themselves? That seems like the opposite of what someone might do with all the experience that you have. And I don't mean that in a bad way.
Yeah.
Like why the focus on the rep?
Well, I think I've been both, right? I've been in software sales my whole career, from an account executive.
Hmm.
like kind of regional sales director, VP of sales. Many years I was a CRO of a public SaaS company as well. So I've seen all
Yep.
sides of it, and I know who to like. The challenge that I have, particularly in tech, we're not exclusively tech. The challenge that I have is that the model that is built on these large VC fundings and these growth expectations builds in failure for the team. Right? Hey,
Yeah.
I'm going to raise a bunch of money. I build this plan. It gets us from 20 million to 80 million, and we only need 30% of our reps to hit our number to do that. So let's just go hire as many as we can. A few of them will hit, the rest of them will attrit. And so it's basically your failure is modeled into their success plan. And it's just
Oh
something
man.
that I'm passionate about. When I was a sales leader, my whole philosophy was all I got to do is make as many people successful as possible. That's it.
Hmm.
That's it. And if I do that, I'm not worried about my number. And so RepView to me is like, and I also love coaching and mentoring salespeople and guiding their careers. Well, RepView, I can do that at scale, right?
Yeah.
Tens of thousands of users already that we have. And whether it's they've logged in once and got one insight, awesome. Or some users that are there every day, that's awesome too. We just want to be able to extend the reach of influencing salespeople from like when I was a CRO, a few hundred people, now like thousands and hundreds of thousands of people. So that's
Yeah.
kind of that.
That's cool. And Rob put in the comments there too. So they dish out quotas that reps can't hit. That's got to be a weird position to be in as a sales leader, where you're seeing the plan being built out for failure. That's got to be a weird kind of position to.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's not always so much like quotas that reps can't hit. I think
Yeah.
I'd even say more frequently it's like, yeah, the quota could, 10 reps could hit that quota, but let's hire 30, right? Three
Yeah.
reps could be successful in this territory, but let's jam 7 reps in there, right? Like, so
Yeah.
there's kind of a balance there, and so then that's something I always struggle with. Like as a CRO, like I'm accountable. I'm accountable to a CEO,
Yeah.
and there's conflict there, right? There's down and up conflict as there is at every level of management, and
Yeah.
that's one reason why I'm not a CRO right now. I could have gone and got another CRO job, but I'm not
Yeah.
because a large part of that is why, and I feel like I can make a bigger and a better impact and feel better about what we're doing by going in a different direction.
Love it. And by the way, just for those of you kind of tuning in and hopping in now, we're going to get this going. We're going to share some tactical stuff with you here in a second and have a framework for you. This is going to kind of set up everything that we're talking about. I want to direct the next question over to you, Darren, because you both of you guys kind of talk about this concept a lot of, and really the theme around this is how do we increase our market value as a rep, right? Um, how do you guys look at, and Darren, I'll start with you, this being top for 5% of your company? Because a lot of people want to be in one of the top reps at their company versus being top 5% in the sales profession. What's the difference in the mindset between those two things?
Yeah, yeah, good question, and thanks for having us as well, Jason. Real quick before that, I want to hit on something that Ryan said about your livelihood and taking the right gig. Like, my dad's
Hmm.
been a reseller of a software company for a long time. He's like, if you're going to do this, where would you want to invest your commission? Because you're not going to make that right off the bat. So it's like, if you were going to make commission money, would you invest it in that company? And that's kind of the mindset I've always had with companies I want to work for.
Oh, I
Um,
love that.
yeah, so to answer your question on top 5% at a company versus the industry, man, I mean, you could be a big fish in a small pond and be the top rep there and be in the top 5% automatically, right? Versus, does that actually mean, and you could have amazing product market fit, but does that actually, like, if you go into an org that maybe doesn't have as good as product market fit and a giant sales team, are you still going to succeed? Uh, the jury's probably out on that one. So I think there's things that you have control over. For me, like, I learned a sales methodology called force management, which is medic or medpic, if people know that,
Hmm.
and command of the message, command of the plan, and it's like the art and science of getting deals done. And it's like, if you can take that with you everywhere to where you become an in and out expert on what you're selling, plus the science of the metrics, who's the economic buyer, the decision criteria, the decision process, identifying pain, and who's your champion, and then also defining what a champion is. Like, that's a whole nother topic we could get into around coaches versus champions. But
Yeah.
if you can nail those two down, you can almost be successful just about anywhere you go if you've got a product that people want.
Yes. Okay. I think this is a good segue into the framework. And by the way, just so you know, Darren and Ryan, we have a lot of prepped content we talked about, of course. If people have more questions, I'm assuming you guys are going to be cool if we get to more of those than
Yeah,
the prepared. Okay.
give the
Cool.
people what they want.
So we see your questions, you guys, in the chat, and we'll make sure to get to as many of those as we can. Here, let's kind of present the model that we're going to work through first. All right. Let me share the old iPad screen here. All right. You guys want to give me just a quick, can I get a couple yeses in the chat? Can you guys see the screen? All right. Everything popping up. I see some nods. Okay. So awesome. Thanks, Mohammed, Thomas, Scott. So when we kind of talked about this originally, we looked at this in kind of a three-part framework. So when we think about a well-balanced sales professional, and we really think about the big thing we want to accomplish here is like, how do we increase our market value? There's really kind of three places that we look at. The first one here on the left is our ability to open and start conversations with prospects. And I'm kind of curious, actually, just Darren or Ryan, how important is it for even a full cycle sales rep these days, an account executive, someone like that, their ability to prospect?
Very.
Yeah, it's everything.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, what Darren was talking about, the idea of what do top reps do well. I've seen a lot of top reps, and they're fanatical prospectors, whether
Yep.
they have to be or not. Right? You come into a sales org, and there's going to be an expectation. X% of your business is going to come from marketing or SDRs.
Yeah.
Hopefully they set the appropriate expectation, and that's
Yep.
they don't tell you it's 80 and then it's 20, but whatever that is, like if it's 50, well, then you're going to prospect for another 100%. You get to get 150. So it's huge, huge.
Yeah. So
And,
this is
and
a
there's,
really,
there's
go
only
ahead, Darren.
so many hours in the day, right? Like
Yep.
if you don't have a one-to-one BDR relationship or a BDR's, two or three AEs to that one BDR, like you're only a third of the time that they're spent, and then you're also relying on potentially getting inbound leads. Like you got to take control of it.
Yes. So the big, I mean, this segues pretty well into this next point is really what we need to get good at from an opening standpoint is how do we go from playing a pure numbers game into this quality approach, this quality first approach. And hopefully you guys can read that. My handwriting's a little sloppy there. So this balance, and we're not going to talk about all three of these pieces today, but what you guys hit on, I think, is just super key, especially as an account executive, is if you have limited time to prospect, you can't just be blasting out hundreds of emails to people every week, right? So you got to figure out how do we take a quality first approach to this? And we're not going to talk about all three of these areas, but what you got to be pretty good at is identifying good fit accounts and knowing those personas inside and out. You got to get really good at engaging those folks. And this is what we're going to talk about today as a framework around how to understand their priorities and problems. So I got to be able to send a good cold email. And for you AEs out there, you got to be able to cold call and pick up the phone too. I see a lot of that in the work that I do too. Is a lot of call reluctance, right? Engage, and then what I call create. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about this today. And again, like I said, we don't have time to go through everything, but we want to give you some good takeaways on the engage section. Okay, let's talk about the closing piece. For you two, what are the kind of keys that you see from a closing standpoint? What are the people that have really good market value from a selling standpoint? What do they do really well from a closing standpoint? What are they able to really prioritize that maybe some of the other folks don't get, just from your guys' observations and experience?
Yeah. Well, I mean, closing it just goes back to discovery, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what does closing mean? Does it mean getting a signature? Does it mean getting a commitment, right? Like, so when I think about what does closing mean, like you sold the deal, right? So yeah, there's administrative things where the legal, PO, procurement, but for me, closing is like, reinforcing the value that was developed based on your discovery and translating your discovery into real value, right? So
Yeah.
the impact of doing nothing or, doing something else, right? So that's, it's an interesting topic. Closing, I'd say, closing is really just all about discovery and the value proposition that you've built based on your discovery.
Yeah. I think on top of that, it comes back to like what I was talking about with the champion, and with Medic. I think with champions, there's a big distinction between coaches and champions. Champions the way that force management kind of describes it is what's in it for them personally. Are they selling when you're not there? Do they have access to the person that's going to sign the contract? And do they have power and influence in the organization? If you've only got 3 out of the 4 of those, like you don't have a champion, you've got a coach. So like,
Yep.
who are you going to go back to at the finish line when you're trying to get a deal over the line? Like, do you actually have somebody in your corner with all 4 of those definitions that's able to do that for you? And if not, like, are you even going to get the deal
Yep.
done?
Exactly. So, and then Eric, by the way, I saw your chat in there. We're definitely going to get to the pay and the comp piece. The reason why we're setting this up is a lot of what you're being paid and knowing if you're being paid fairly has to do with your skill level too. That's why we're talking about this, Eric. So I see a man in the chat there. So basically what I'm hearing from you guys is we got to get really good at going from why you. A lot of sellers are really good at talking about why you should use their product or their service. And what we got to get better at doing is selling why change. So what's the value? Why should I do something different from what I'm doing right now? So there's 3 pieces to this. And again, we're not going to address all of them today, but it has a lot to do with your ability to connect. So someone mentioned in here, and I'm curious what you guys have to say about this. Yeah, Mohammed mentioned it. It's the time that you're able to get with executives. So do you guys see that too as the ability to sell to the C-suite or the VPs versus having to work your way from the bottom all the time? Is that something that you guys see as an important skill set?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with what Darren said in the last comment, which is whether it's a C level or VP, somebody that has the ability to make a decision, right? And we've seen so many deals go sideways to that point because they're just not at that level. So, does it take a different type of communication? Yes and no. I mean, I think they're probably more interested in just the core value, not the features, that sort of thing. But
Yep.
I think it just comes back to who's got purchasing authority.
Yeah. So your ability to connect, and then you mentioned this, Ryan, to quantify. So impact. So what's the impact of this? And then your ability to control the sales cycle and the narrative too. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today is this last piece. So this grow piece is really your ability to manage your career. And the big shift that we see here is not relying so much on your company for that and taking more ownership on yourself to do this. So we're going to segue into some of those topics here. So what we're going to talk about with you guys today, comp and finding the right org. All right. So you guys have done a ton of polls and things like that we're going to dig into here in a second, but let's talk about compensation. So what should we know about comp? Where do you see reps not advocating for themselves enough when it comes to how they're paid? And if maybe you could start during the job hunting process and then also their current jobs too. What are you guys seeing?
Yep. Yeah, I'll start. I mean, I think that we're in sales, right? And so there's a large percentage of your compensation that's unknown. It's variable, right? Yeah, we have a joke. It's like, is it on target earnings or is it off target earnings, right? And that's core to visibility that we're trying to help deliver and transparency, which is like, what does an on target earning actually mean, right? Okay, so when you get a job offer, so its base is 80K and your on target's 160 because there's 80K in variable if you hit your number. Well, what literally everything that goes into that you need to know, right? You need to know exactly how that is calculated, what your quota is, all that before you join on. And then you need to validate and verify what's happening now. Is it 30% of the team hitting? Is it 50? Is it 70? And then what is the company's goal? Do they want it to be 55? Do they want it to be 60? Do they, what, and where are they now? And what's causing the discrepancy and what are they doing to close that gap? Right. I mean, so, the biggest thing is just like, yeah, you got an OTE offer, but can you even hit it?
Yeah. Yeah. And like, okay, so let's say you're building out a team and you're hiring 6 reps as an example, and everybody's got the same OTE of, call it like 100 and 100, right? Are all those territories created equal? Is all the inbound lead flow created equal? Is the BDR support created equal? Right? Like if you're selling a product that like if it's early on, like usually the East Coast and the West Coast reps kill it. Like if you've got Central Territory or like mid Oklahoma, you're probably not going to do as well, depending on what you're selling.
Okay, so we have a couple questions that are relevant to this, and I want to go into these before we kind of hit the polls here. Eric asked a question earlier. He said, here's a question for Ryan. How long should a sales rep get their comp plan after they are hired? And this is like, this question worries me a little bit, the way that it's framed.
Yeah.
But what are your guys' thoughts on that? How long should a sales rep get their comp plan after they're hired?
Yeah. I mean, Garen, you want to go first?
Before you start, I feel like that'd be helpful, but I guess it depends on when you start. Are you starting at the beginning of the fiscal year? I've seen it dragged out at organizations. Let's say the fiscal year starts Jan 1. I've seen them dragged out till May, which is crazy. Somebody on LinkedIn the other day said that it's August and they started a Jan 1 fiscal year. They still haven't received their comp plan, which I find absurd. I mean, I got to think within 30 days, right? Is that unreasonable,
Yeah.
Ryan?
No, I mean, I tell people, this is one of our interview questions, like ask for a sample comp plan, right? Like the comp plan should be done, right? To Darren's point, yeah, maybe it has some changes and it's a little late. It's January 20th and like, we're going to have it by February 15th. Okay, I'll give you a pass there. But there is a comp plan, right? If you're if you're not the first salesperson at the company, there should be a comp plan, right? Yep. If you're the first salesperson, then when you start, if you don't have one, it's like, well, let's talk about when I'm going to get my plan. And okay, but if you're not the first salesperson, it should be before you start, right?
Isn't it easier, Ryan, with one rep versus like 50?
You tell me. I don't know. It wasn't too difficult. Yeah,
you had it for me in the first week when I joined. It wasn't that hard.
No, it's important, and that's where there's a disconnect. Like, why would you not have it? Like, isn't that kind of important as a rep, like to know how, because it goes back OTE. Well, your OTE is driven by your comp plan. Well, yeah, we don't really have that. Well, okay.
So how do you come up with my OTE?
Right. Yeah.
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 Well, and what does it say about the org when it takes that long?
Yep.
Right. What are they valuing? They're not valuing their employees.
Territory planning, how long does that take? That's built into the comp plan. So like, how long should that really take?
So one thing I want to address with people asking questions, there's no such thing as a stupid question here. So Eric, hopefully that didn't come off the wrong way when I mentioned that. These are really good questions to ask. And I know it takes a little bit of vulnerability to ask some of these questions, you guys, in a kind of publicish forum. So keep the questions coming. These are great.
Eric posted, my friend is at 3 months, still no plan. She keeps asking weekly, bi-weekly. Woof. Yeah. God, be looking on RepView for a new org.
Yep. So what parts of, if we talk about the comp plan a little bit, I know that a lot of people take jobs where there's a clear commission structure in place and they have their base salary, but the bonuses and all of that stuff, it's like a to be determined. So ideally, when you come into it and you're talking to them, what parts are you guys recommending that are okay to kind of like need to still be fleshed out versus stuff that should be ironclad, got to be in the contract before you come on board type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's always some level of trust, right? That because the management can always change the comp plan, which is another issue that people go through very, very regularly. But there really shouldn't be that much, gray area, right? You're going to come on board at 80K, or to use simple math, 100K base, 100K OTE. So that's 100 or 100K variable, right? And typically, maybe that's $1 million type of quota. If you go to 10X, your variable comp, right? So is that those level of mechanics should be very clear, right? What's my territory? You should know and ask, what's your specific territory before you start as well, and who makes up that territory? Is it geographic? Is it a list of accounts? Can I see the accounts? What's penetration? Why'd the last rep leave? Right? That all, that level of granularity should be table stakes for taking a new sales job, an AE job in particular.
Yeah, and on top of that, are you expanding out the territory? Or are you dividing it even more? How do you know that your team can support more reps? Like you had 5 reps last year, you've got the same TAM this year, and you're going to cut it in half. Did the whole team hit the number last year to warrant that?
Right.
All questions you'd be asking.
This is great. And Nicolette kind of pointed out here in the chat too, the willingness to be curious and ask questions is what separates a great rep from an average one. So even during the interview process and even with your employer too, not just your prospects, and your clients.
And if you're a good hiring manager, that should get factored in. You're like, whoa, this person does really good discovery. Like they're doing discovery on me. Like if someone's not getting a role because of that, like that's a major red flag.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. We got another one here from Connor. He asks, if you're hired on as an OTE employee, but you're being paid on a per deal basis, so not as a percent to goal times variable, what should you say to bring this up? to superiors.
Why is it set up that way? It might be my first question.
I'm not sure I understand completely how you're describing that as a per deal basis. So you get a base salary and you get it like a unit based versus a deal, like a bookings or ARR or value based, revenue based. I don't know, Jason, if you can clarify that for me.
It looks like a flat rate per deal versus a percent.
Oh,
Well,
it's in per unit. Maybe it sounds like you may not
per
sell
unit, yeah,
software.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe
Well,
like,
so yeah, so per unit, if every unit essentially contributes the same value to the company from a revenue standpoint, then that's fine, and you can essentially back your way into what is the effective rate, right? So that's one way. However, when you start getting into unit A looks a lot different than unit B and drives way more value to the company, then you've got kind of an issue there where it's like, why would I? First of all, it's bad. It's a bad look. Second of all, it incentivizes the wrong behavior. How many easy units can I get in that are probably way low value for the company that versus that high value unit that's going to be harder to sell, but I don't care because I can get paid the same, right? So different units with different prices. It doesn't make, it's an older school mentality, and it's likely something that will, it's kind of like, unfortunately, sales is also like the evolution of man, right? Sometimes these things in certain organizations take a long time to cycle through, right? Like, like we're not going to look too different like 1,000 years from now, like 1,000,000 years from now, maybe so.
yeah, and there's probably, I mean, to that point, like there's a disconnect between some leaders and orgs that are building comp plans based on when they were reps, maybe, couple generations ago versus now, and like it's a different animal.
Right.
Like go make 600 dials a day. Like how? How do you physically want me to make 600 dials a day?
Yep.
Dude, you better have an auto dialer if you're being asked to make 600 dials a day.
Yeah.
Oh, they picked up. Hello.
Oh, now I can't hit my 600 dial number because I got somebody on the phone.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
here's what we'll do. Let's keep the conversation going on comp. Ryan and Darren, if you guys are cool with it, let's go to the slides and the polls, because I think the polls are going to stir up a bunch of questions
Sure.
for everyone, and we want to kind of direct some of these questions to you guys as well. So here, let me get to the right slide here.
Eric, I
And
hope she answers a lot of those calls.
yeah.
Probably not hitting your number though.
Okay. Keep the questions coming, you guys, by the way. These are great questions. So let's talk about this. Are you being paid fairly? Hit us up in the chat. What do you feel is the biggest issue with your quota calculation? These guys threw a poll out. And the cool thing is that these guys get thousands of reps to comment on these polls. So we get a really good pulse of what other people are saying.
Team Rep, you representing in the polls.
Yep. What do you feel is the biggest issue with your quota calculation? Let us know in the chat. Eric says bad number.
That was when he was calling his mom.
Oh, okay.
Maybe both though.
Yeah. Is there anything? Let us know in the chat. We'll give you a second here. Yeah, it's unreasonable. Yeah, we can definitely dig into that. So is the base salary reasonable?
A lot
for
of
someone with
variables to that
experience?
one.
Yep.
Average deal size makes a big difference in that experience,
Still some regional stuff.
a little bit. Yeah.
Yep. Is the product ready? Steven says, hey, Doug. Yeah, global shifts, very green territory. That's one that I hear a lot too, you guys, is a rep comes on board and all of a sudden it's, oh, I'm actually going to be going after an industry vertical we have no experience in.
Mm-hmm.
I can't use any of the case studies or client stories or any of that kind of stuff. Okay, these are
you're a
pretty
guinea pig, really. You're an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what you guys learned in the poll. How do you guys interpret these results, by the way?
This one, unlike a lot of polls that you see on LinkedIn, there's reasonably even split here, right? Sure, misaligned territory versus top of funnel support. I think the first one, not enough addressable market, and misaligned territory are somewhat related. Although one is kind of macro and one's kind of micro. Like, hey, there's 8 territories and I got the worst one and it's horribly unfair. Not enough addressable market means you have too many reps, right? That's the issue, right? It's just an oversaturated, we call it, what's the quota coverage relative to addressable market? And
Supply
then
and
to
demand. Yep.
yeah, and then limited top of funnel support. I mean, yeah, I think that's, if you look at RepView, the lowest rated sentiment category is inbound lead flow across all companies, kind of all verticals, right? So people always want more leads, definitely get that. But I kind of look at this poll as like, there's a lot of problems with how quotas are being calculated right now, right? And you know, a lot of it's being fueled by intense venture capital money coming in and intense expectation of C-suite to grow the business. You know, but too many quota carriers, not enough addressable market, misaligned territory is all related to, you know, how we're trying to force, you know, is the market meeting, you know, something like Darren's point, supply and demand.
And it's like something else that's not brought up on here is like pricing strategy. You know, you get some early success, you go to market with a certain price, and is that, you know, maybe the stage of the company warrants that at the early stage because it's like a hot button for companies, but maybe a nice to have for some of the laggard companies out there, like, and you're still going with the same pricing strategy, that impacts it too.
So limited top of funnel support. So
Limited.
Omar, hey Omar, in the chat mentioned that.
Yeah. Yeah. The limited top of funnel. Yeah. I mean, what, so you ask yourself, what if the company didn't hire those next two sales professionals, account executives, whatever, and put that money in strategic marketing? Do you have confidence that those dollars would be appropriately allocated to drive top of funnel? And B, would the company be courageous enough, I'll use the word courageous enough, to do that when you know there's some correlation? Like, I know if I hire an AE, this is the challenge as a CRO, an AE equals X output, right? Well, these marketing campaigns, like, oh, we're gonna go to this conference, like it's a little, or we're gonna rebrand, right? You saw Gong rebranded and Sales Law, like, well, that's a lot of money. And then what is the output from a top of funnel impact on that $1 million that Gong just spent on their rebrand? I mean, you'd have to ask them, but that's the question, right? Or Sales Loft. I mean, both great brands, right? And have a lot of money in the bank. So, you know, probably not as much of an issue there, but, you know, do you feel confident that it'll turn into that, right?
Yeah. And then it's like, you're also betting your commission and that investment I talked about of you're betting on a demand gen leader that's not pumping out ebooks like that were happening in like 2005, because that was the model. Are they using intent data? Are they doing do they have an ABM strategy, right? There's a lot you're betting on that you have no control over.
Yes. So what I'm taking away from this, from the chat and then from YouTube, is that you need to ask about what the top of funnel support's going to be like, and you need to be convinced. You need to know their demand gen strategy. You need to know what kind of help you're going to get from the SDR, BDR. If you're a full cycle sales rep, like this is the thing that you really need to focus on. And it's funny because I see some people in the chat, some of them are clients that I recognize the names, and I'm doing some work with them, but this is something to really, really focus on.
Yeah. And there's, to that point too, if you're going into an early stage company as an example, and they're hiring salespeople before a marketer, that's a major red flag, because now you're saying your marketing team is your sales team. So you don't even know if you don't even know if you're going to have enough inbound lead flow. Do you even know if you have enough customer stories that you can leverage in order to be successful as a rep? And then, you know, you see companies out there that hire 5 or 6 reps before a demand gen marketing leader. Like, that's a major red flag.
Yep. By the way, you guys, we're going to share something at the end where you can go check out a tool that's going to help you figure out your exact comp and how it stacks up against other people at your company and across other similar orgs too. So we're going to share that with you guys. So hang on. Let's keep going. I'm kind of curious about this. And Omar, I want to comment on what he put in the chat. Most orgs don't even have a playbook when it comes to generating pipeline for both BDRs and AEs. Is that something to ask for in the interview process? What kind of playbook do you guys have in place for outbound? If I'm going to be expected to do it, what do you already have in place?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one, honestly, it's just really one chapter of the overall, you know, go to market funnel playbook, top of funnel playbook. Where does and this is like, as you know, as a sales leader or a marketing leader or a CRO, like, where is it coming from? Like, can you attribute everything? Like, do you know where it's coming from? And then what's working? You have to know where it's coming from and then what's working. And if you know what's working, then you can invest more in that area. So absolutely, you should ask, tell me about top of funnel. Where does business come from? How do they get aware of the business? How do they become aware of the business? How do they get into the funnel? And then how do they get qualified?
Yep.
Yeah, and I think, we're talking about the equality and we've got 6 minutes left in the interview. What questions do you have for me? I mean, if we're going to equalize the back and forth of information flow, to Ryan's point, like if I'm coming in as a rep to a company, I maybe want to interview their BDR manager where I sit down and I've got a bunch of questions like, what's your strategy? What's that playbook that you're working on? Like, how do you drive inbound demand? What's the playbooks that you're giving to your BDR team to be successful? Like, these are all things I'd want to know. Because I mean, at the end of the day, it's your career, right?
Yep.
Like you own that, and it's money either going in or not going in your pocket.
Yep. By the way, if you ask a question, you guys, and we miss it, throw it into the Q&A function here there in Zoom. Click Q&A at the bottom and throw it in there. I see a few people have done it, Scott and Mohammed, and we'll make sure to get to it. Okay, next question. Give us a yes or no in the chat. I see this a lot, Ryan and Jared, by the way, with the companies that I work with. But should your comp plan be the same no matter where you live? So if you live in a place that's very low cost of living in the Midwest, should you be paid the same amount as someone living in the Bay Area? Let us know. Give us a yes or no in the chat. Do you think that your comp plan should be the same no matter where you live? Matt says yes.
Pre-COVID, post-COVID, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty
So
accurate.
the remote environment has probably had a lot of impact on this, I'm assuming, with people not necessarily coming into the office. Yet, yes, if you perform the same function.
It only matters what value. Yeah, I agree with David. Only matters what value you bring to the company.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what the poll said.
And I think there's what does this mean exactly, right? I'm thinking about this like even pre-COVID, like that maybe when you have offices in different regions, maybe there's some slight cost of living base adjustments for AEs, but like especially now, it's just like no, it should have never been like a comp plan should have always been the same quota, same commission rates and payout rates. Especially in kind of post COVID, right? It's a personal opinion, right? For me, honestly, and people are entitled to that personal opinion. But if I'm hiring, go live wherever you want. Here's the range, and I've seen companies that say the range we're going to pay. I forget which one it was. I saw a company we're going to pay 60% of Bay Area base or market or whatever, and you can go work. You can work wherever you want, but that's our. It might have been 50% or something, but and so that's their comp philosophy.
I also like using the sports analogy on this. Someone like Giannis on the Milwaukee Bucks just won the NBA Finals. He makes more money in a small market in Milwaukee than LeBron does in a huge market in LA. He's making more money per year. Why? Because he's got more value. So why should it matter what market you're in?
I'm looking at the comments too, right? So Ann's comment there. I think the objective here would be like you should be making more, right? Like I think like you're saying no. I think maybe we're just so we're clear, like everybody should have the same base. It should be a livable base based on what? New York, maybe. I mean, or it's a livable base based on a 75th percentile cost of living city. And you know what? Maybe it's not the right fit for you. If you really want to live in San Francisco and live downtown in San Francisco, well, maybe it's not the right fit for you because we pay X, right? And that's a decision a company can make certainly as well.
Or what if you're a rep that negotiates a comp plan based on initially living in San Francisco or New York, two of the most expensive markets in the country, and then within 2 months of joining, after you have that higher comp plan, what if you go move to like a remote part of Oregon, Jason, which is cheaper than San Francisco, or like, somewhere in New Hampshire that might be cheaper than New York City? Should your comp get cut?
Yep. And yeah, Brian, they do. Although I think it's a remote game more and more these days, right? I mean, so it's like you business opportunities, my Zoom and my laptop and my phone are my business opportunities. I'm not going to walk down the block. It's not 100% the case. I get that obviously, but
Yeah, I see Ann's comment in here. Smart reps don't include commission in their basic needs budget. Commission is for debt, investing, and savings for me personally, at least. Like I'm with you, Ann. Like I never, as a rep, even thought, I thought I would make $0 commission because A, it put me in the mindset of like, I need to go work my butt off to even hit this. And number two, just basic day-to-day like living. Like I never thought about, I budgeted below my base. Everything else was gravy on top of that.
Yeah. Hey, I got a
That's a
question
whole
from
nother
Nick.
conversation with rep personal
Yeah.
finance.
I got another question from Nick here in the Q&A. By the way, you guys, if you could start directing the questions in the Q&A, that'll help us sort a little bit better. He said, how do you know if you're just complaining about top of funnel or if it is actually a problem? For example, I have self-prospected 50% plus of my revenue this year. Having to source the majority of your deals decreases bandwidth of deals I can work. So how do you know if the top of funnel is a problem?
Yeah, I would say that there's a clear way to know, and that's what is the expectation that was set to you when you took that role, and then what is the expectation, right? Because that's really what it comes down to. And you know, when you talk about transparency in sales orgs, right? If I'm going to take a role and they say, hey, look, you're going to have to prospect for 75% of your deals, okay, 25% will come inbound. Well, that's a great sales role for certain people, and then there's a lot of other people that's not a great sales role for, right? So the problem is, and this is probably the problem with that question, is that they're having to prospect 75, 80% of their time. Their commissions are capped. Go look at the poll that I put out on LinkedIn today, by the way. It's about capped commissions and how that plays out. But it's all about expectations. So, hey, it's 80% cold calling, and here's how you make money. And okay, great. Or hey, it's only 20% pipeline generated from cold calling. Okay, great. And then you get the job and it's 80. That's a problem. That's how you know it's a problem. So you reset now and be like, hey, manager, here's how I'm hitting my number. This is the process. Is this what I should expect? And if so, this is the amount of money you can earn. And then you got to look at it and say, is this the right role for me? Right. So really it goes back to expectations.
Yeah. Expectations minus reality is disappointment.
Yeah. So we're going to get to Eric. You said you had a question about your base and what's doable. We're going to share a resource at the end to tell you if that's doable or not. So I see your question. Okay, I got another interesting one for you guys from Mohammed. When getting promoted at a company, they pay less than an external hire despite great performance. Do you see it necessary to leave somewhere else to increase base OTE faster for your career?
Kind of a sad reality, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, I've seen how this plays out with internal budgets and internal annual reforecasting, and you know, you can't, you know, it's special approved to go up, but then yeah, if you got to hire somebody, they're really the sales leader can pitch, oh, they're really good, we need to get them, we got to offer this. It just happens all the friggin' time. I mean, all the time it happens. And so, and it's a tried and true for many years. The best way to get a raise is switch companies, right? And there's still many truths to that, and it still happens all the time. And we're trying to help with transparency in comp with RepView, of course, and making those figures and numbers available. But I think my recommendation to people is just be upfront. You know, look, hey, I can go. I've got these. Like, I want to stay. This is what I need to stay. I'd love to work here. If not, that's fine too. We'll part as friends, kind of thing. Like, you know, like transparency in everything you do is valuable. So I wish I could say no, that's not the case. That's really rare. That never happens. All companies are super transparent. I can't say that though.
Yeah. If anything, you guys, what you're getting from this hopefully is knowing where you can and put your foot down, you know, and what you should and shouldn't tolerate. So let's keep rolling. So
I think to that point too, Jason, it's like if you're at the top of the leaderboard, like that's an opportunity to go renegotiate. Like if you've done it for a couple quarters in a row and it's outside the cycle of when comp plans should be adjusted, which like we did a poll on that too. Like absolutely, that's your leverage.
Yep. Okay, we got another one here that a lot of people have been asking about in the chat too. Let me know in the chat what you think. What is an acceptable time frame to have your incentive comp plan changed? And was the purpose of this, Darren and Ryan, was this like unwillingly changed?
Could be either or, right?
Is it ever willingly changed for the
True. Yeah, let us know in the chat. What do you feel is acceptable to have your incentive comp plan changed? Brian says 1 quarter notice.
I'd be curious, Brian, 1 quarter notice at the end of a fiscal, or could it be in the middle of a year?
Yeah, let us know in the
Yeah.
chat, you guys. What do you think? What's an acceptable time frame to have your incentive comp plan
Middle is fine.
changed? Brian says
I don't
middle
know
is
if I'm
fine.
killing it and I'm way out and I'm on track to make some annual accelerators. I don't want that changed in the middle of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yearly, Matt says.
Yeah.
Maybe once in the fiscal year. So here's just for in the interest of time, you guys. This is what the people out on the LinkedIn's think.
Let me just say this: the comp plans should change. Like, obviously, there's little accelerators you can tweak here and there. That's not really a big deal. Like, as long as it's not like going to materially reduce the payout for the trajectory of the reps, performance and whatnot. But the comp plan changing like meaningfully means the business has changed, like the structure of the business. Like we're pivoting from, product A to product B and it's different, or, something major, right? So like if the comp plan is changing more frequently, and then annually is fine, I think, to reassess, the overall landscape of the comp plan and what's working and what's not. If it's changing more often than that, like structurally, like, is it changing because the business is structurally changing? So if it is, why is the business structurally changing that often? Like, is it just pivoting all around, or if it's not changing because the business is structurally changing, what's the objective? What's the goal? Is it like, well, we're scared we're gonna have to pay out all this money, right? Well, then that means the leadership is ineffective at understanding how to build comp plans, which is also a red flag as well.
Yep. I feel like we got a lot of momentum, you guys, right now with comp plans. So if you have comp plan questions, throw them into the Q&A. I'm assuming you two, Darren, Ryan, you guys seem to be on a roll with this too. We're going in a very different direction from what we thought, but we want to help you guys out here. That's the purpose. It's almost turning into like an AMA.
That's cool.
You guys remember? Do you remember that app called Clubhouse from back in the day? It's kind of like reminds me of Clubhouse. I think you could download it on your mobile phone. I can't remember where I heard about it.
It was a
It
long
was
time
it
ago.
was super popular for a while.
Okay, so David Mitchell's got a really great question here. He says, I'm in a situation now where an unusually large deal that is not a typical account for my role is coming in at the end of the year. The company is lowering my commission on this deal to a third of my typical commission rate. They are saying this wasn't in my comp plan, and they are leaning on the fact that all commissions are discretionary. I'm attempting to negotiate back to my normal commission rate. Any tips on what to do? God, this is another tough one.
All commission. I mean, yeah, all commissions are discretionary usually. But so what that's telling you is that, like, well, who's making that discretion and why, right? Like, is the company going to realize less value from that business than your other smaller deals that you sign, right? Like, it just, it's a bad deal, right? And it's, are they, what is the justification? The justification is they don't want to pay, right? That's the justification. They don't want to pay for the deal. Like, there's more that can go into, like, how did the deal get sourced? Did are you doing all the work on the deal? This, that, and the other. They can justify that sort of thing. But, I would again have that direct conversation. Like, what's the pros and cons of that decision by the company? And
I'd also be curious how the role was described. If it was described as uncapped commissions, which is Ryan's poll today, and then they're capping it, like, seems a little hypocritical to me. Not a good way to retain reps, especially ones closing big deals.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a bummer. I got another one here. Amanda asks, when is good to ask about comp plans in interviewing? Final interview, right away? Do you guys have any pointers on questions you can ask around it? This is another big thing that I hear reps ask a lot about.
I mean, you can ask early, right? The recruiter might not be the best bet. You typically have your first call with the recruiter or whatnot to give you the overview of the position, get to know them a little bit. But once you start talking to somebody in a hiring management position, you should start asking about comp plans. And a good question to ask would be, can you share a sample comp plan, right? Like, and then you can follow that up with questions on what that comp plan is.
I'd also ask, like, kind of A/B test it, ask some of those same questions to the hiring manager, and then if you're talking to a VP as well too, because if you're getting different answers, like, that's a major red flag if the hiring manager and the VP aren't on the same page.
Mm-hmm. Ask for the previous year comp plan as well, and then you can see how do they change, how much do they change.
That's another big theme I've heard from you guys too, is ask for what's the history on this, what's the track record. And I know you two post about this a lot too. If you're gonna want
how many
people
hit quota
track record, what's your track record?
Yeah. Well, that's, yeah. So and then that leads into, okay, have the comp plan. All right. How many people achieve this? How many people hit 100%, right? And then you can vet that with the data that we have, of course, on RepView. But and that's always good to see, like, all right, and see if they're straight, and you can vet that and compare it. And then if they're low, like, oh, only 38% hit, that doesn't necessarily for me mean you should eliminate that company, right? To me, that then drives a follow-up. All right, well, what would you like it to be? What's driving that gap? And what are you doing to close that gap? And if that company has a really solid answer for those questions, I'm still pretty comfortable. It doesn't necessarily eliminate that company. There's other things you want to do to further vet if it's low, talk to former and current reps, for example. But that's the line of questioning I would take.
Yeah, so there's a couple other ones here. We kind of answered Scott's here, but he basically says on comp plan, we kind of talked about how often the company should change it acceptably, but he said his company has changed the payout every year, but they're growing by 30% every year. Does that feel a little unfair to you guys?
Well, I mean, it
Sounds
depends
like
on the
cash flow.
industry, right? Yeah, I mean, it's like, what's you should have like a company should have a philosophy, right? Whether it's our baseline kind of rate is like a roughly 10%, right? Like,
Yep.
what, I mean, that really shouldn't change, right? It's cost of sale, it's built in the financial model. Like, well, let's go 8, let's go 9, let's go to 7, let's go to 6. Like, that's definitely a red flag. Like, but maybe it's getting to a normal point and they originally had it really high, and that's okay. But again, just ask the question: what's the low point here? Like, if I stay 3 more years, am I losing a point each year? Is it gonna be 4% in a couple of years, or
Yeah.
whatever? However, the comp plan is structured.
You're taxing yourself at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for you guys that I know part of what you do at RepView is you're helping people see what percentage of people actually hit quota at the company. That's one of the things that people can find out. And we'll share it with you guys here in a second. But, MLMs have to, I believe, don't they have to be public with what percentage of people make certain amount of money or something like that? Like, do you think companies should have to be a little bit more transparent about that in any way, at least during the interview process with how many people actually hit quota? What do you guys think about that?
Have you looked at an MLM plan that's posted online anywhere? It's like it's impossible to figure out what's what. And I think part of that
Yeah.
reason the MLM plans are like that is because most people, as you know, sign up, pay a bunch of money to get at some kit where they
Yeah.
can be you just pay. Don't need to get into that. But
Great documentary on that right now about Lulu on Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my
Check it
God.
out. But think of
I'm not a fan of
Colorado.
MLMs, by the way. I didn't bring it up because of that. I'm very against MLMs.
What are you trying to sell me, Jason? I don't need any energy drinks. I'm good. But what about
Yeah.
Colorado's law? Colorado's law passed where you have to show ranges, I think, for all jobs posted, I believe. Check me on that. But I think you're starting to see some ticks in that direction. It's going to be a while, but that's something to look at.
Yeah, and I think the other side of that too is, like, as a private company, you're not required to disclose your revenue. So, even public companies, and if you read their quarterly earnings or their annual, the annual reports, the 10Ks, they're not disclosing team by team quota attainment.
Mm-hmm.
It's just revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we got like 2 or 3 minutes left here. You guys, these have been really great questions. We'll have to do some sort of follow-up or something on LinkedIn where we can kind of finish some of the thread, but I want to give you guys a chance. We've talked a lot about comp today when we were planning on talking about it as a portion, and just a ton of people have questions about this. Can you guys share a little bit more about RepView? It's a free tool for reps, by the way. Can you guys share more about RepView and how this can help? And we'll share a way for people to check it out. Like, what can they expect when they sign up for a free account?
Yeah, well, the whole model is, as a sales professional, you take 2.5 minutes, enter in a rating of a current or former sales org where you've sold, B2B sales org. And once you do that, you have full access to all the data. And what our job is to take the data that we get and transform that data into highly consumable, visually appealing profiles of what it's really like to work in that sales organization. So our goal is, when you go and you look at a sales org profile, you can quickly see pros, cons, how many people are hitting quota, role by role, detailed compensation data. Really, the mission is this a role that I want to work for? So how do reps use it? Oh, a recruiter reached out to me from company XYZ. I'm going to go check them out on RepView. I'm interviewing at company XYZ. I'm going to go check them out on RepView. Some reps use it for prospecting in certain areas. What I got to prospect and find a bunch of companies that are struggling on lead flow, struggling on professional development, because that's what I sell. You can see everybody's tech stack, what tech stack they're deploying. You can go check, hey, is my compensation relatively fair compared to the other team members on my team? I'm on the mid-market team at software company XYZ. And it's not just software, it's, we have tons of other industries as well.
Yeah, there is some really badass stuff, you guys, that you could check out on there. Make sure I drop the link in there and we'll send out a follow-up afterwards. I mean, you can
Thank you.
get what percentage of team is hitting quota, what the typical attrition rate is. You guys could use this to look at your own company to see how you're being paid to your peers. I mean, there's just the average deal size, the base versus I mean, there's just like everything that you can go in there. And yeah, I don't want to undersell it, you guys. It is a badass tool. I feel like you're a rep, it's free to use. You got to check it out.
Yep.
Is there anything
Yeah,
you
on top
guys
of that,
we
there's some
got?
great,
Oh, go
some of
ahead,
these,
Darren. Yep.
yeah, I was gonna say one of these, we've talked a lot about like questions to ask in interviews, like that. There's a great blog article about that, like 7 questions to ask in every sales interview with the hiring manager, stuff about RSUs
Yep.
versus stock options. The blog's got some great content as well.
Yeah, so make sure to check that out. Darren, Brian, appreciate you guys so much for spending an hour with us. This freaking flew by and went in a very different direction than we would thought. But everyone else, I appreciate your engagement and the questions you asked. And we'll send out a follow up with this, and we'll have to do something, Darren and Ryan, on LinkedIn, answering some of the other questions. I don't know quite what, but a lot of people had some questions. So go check out RepView and have a good rest of your week, everyone. Appreciate you showing up and spending an hour with us.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys. See you guys.
Appreciate it.
See ya later.